Full intro.
And there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage. Episode 10 is here. Want to thank you for hanging out. And tonight we have an amazing collection of brilliant people that are brilliant at what they do, but even better than that, they are exceptionally gifted in working with the people that they work with. Before we do that, I want to first of all say thanks so much for hanging out. Two, I'm Doug. What we do here is we put collections of people together that you might not normally see in the same room at the same time and get a chance to hear what they've got to say as they interact. The other thing is we get a chance to talk about gear, hence the Doppler's Gear Garage bit. So first of all, if we haven't met yet, thanks so much for tuning in. A lot of the people that watch, I know from the Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, John Petrucci Guitar Camp, so on and so forth. But if you're kind of in the tech community and that is to say, the guitar tech community, and we haven't met yet, I just want to thank you for coming in. It's going to be an amazing time, but I also just want to say hi, and I'm Doug. All right, before we actually jump into this thing, one of the things about the mission here is to help people know about the new and groovy gear that's on the market. So this is the BT Pro. This is a Bluetooth DI, and I don't know about you, but basically the moment I hook this thing up to my computer, pretty much everything that I wanted to do, except for what I wanted to do, happens. So the neat thing about this is you can connect it to your audio interface, you can connect it to a PA. So, you know, if you're like me, you're constantly documenting stuff on your mobile device and want to maybe get it into a Pro Tools session such that the original impetus of an idea is actually married into the Pro Tools session from the beginning. So you always have that there. It's a great resource for that. This right here is the previous version of the Dynamount. And I know Joe Satriani had one of these out with him. And basically it is a mobile mic mover. There is an app that comes with it, and there's a brand new version that showed up this morning that I'm going to be doing a demo for on Doug Doppler's YouTube channel, youtube.com/Doug Doppler. Very excited about that. Also, this little ditty came out yesterday, and this is the new PRS Hollow Body 2 Piezo. It's got double outputs, and it's got an LR Bags Piezo system in it, and this thing sounds amazing. We're going to be getting demos. All of those are going to be online soon. So with that said, what we're going to do now is we're going to move into this next phase of tonight, and we're going to bring in some folks here that are the glue for some of our favorite artists in the entire world. So let's take a look if we can't do a little bit of this right here. And we're going to head over to Zoom. Gentlemen, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourselves. Well, actually, let's start up at the top there. In the upper left, we have the one and only Scott Appleton. He is legendary. He's just kind of worked for everybody, and we've got some photos to prove it. Scott, how are you, first of all?
I'm awesome. Thank you very much.
We had the pleasure of hanging out today. And, you know, the best thing about these guys, in case you don't know them yet, is that, first of all, they all play. They all love the guitar. They love gear. And they love talking about guitar gear. So pretty much I've had the opportunity to spend copious amount of time learning about the things that they know, which is part of what we're going to share with you tonight, but also getting a chance to go, these guys know to hang out. So Scott, you are from Wisconsin. So like many of the people who are in your craft, you left Wisconsin or wherever it was that you started, and you headed to Nashville. you were in Nashville and somebody said, hey, do you want to maybe tech? And so kind of here you are. So if you could, why don't you start with just a small list of the amazing people that you worked for over the years?
Oh, geez. Peter Frampton, B-52s, Journey, Def Leppard. Who else? Rush, Nine Inch Nails, Tool. Did some one-off stuff for Styx over the years. Who else? I've lost track. There's too many.
Well, that's awesome. So you were kind enough to send along some photos of Alex's rig and also some of the different instruments. So I can't wait to get to that. So that is going to be great. I'm going to keep going down the left-hand side here. Maddie, this was actually your baby here. So you kind of said, hey, why don't we put together this tech roundtable? So first of all, thank you, because except for you and Mike Manning, I don't know any of these fine gentlemen. So thank you for helping out. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am, as my buddy says, better than better. So, Maddie, so you kind of came into this again. Nobody that I've spoken to thus far said, I'm in high school. I want to slave over guitars, work with guitar players, most of whom are awesome, and some of whom are whining guitar players. But you kind of had this interesting route. So you went to Full Sail. You actually have a tremendous amount of expertise in audio, which probably is a huge help with working with John Petrucci. Now, that said, you kind of went to Full Sail, and then your journey also kind of was a little bit of an indirect one. First of all, can you be so kind as to name some of the bands that you worked with over the years?
Sure. Started with Pat Travers. That's how I got into guitar teching.
Yeah.
And then Deep Purple, Ronnie James Dio, Dream Theater, White Snake. I did a little stint in the pop world with Shakira and American Idol, stuff like that. Blue Man Group. And then back to Dream Theater. And that's where I've been for the last, 10, 12 years now, I think.
That's awesome. All right. Chad, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, so although we've never met, I kind of, if you will, grew up Metallica. Kirk Hammett studied with the same guitar teacher I had. Metallica. I worked at BAM magazine. Anybody here remember BAM? Somebody out there remembers BAM.
Wow.
So I was the webmaster there, and I remember there was a cover, the top 40 that radio won't touch. Of course, that's changed, but that was a really iconic headline there. And Metallica has done so much to shape music, stadium tours. That's one of the things that is so exciting about tonight is we're going to get a chance to kind of talk about the range of different types of gigs and the range of different types of musicians and the prep and the tech that goes into that. Can you tell us kind of where you got started and kind of how you ended up doing this, and also some of the people that you've worked with, obviously Blue Man Group and Metallica?
Chad, I'll keep it short, but I just want to first thank you for hooking us all up with all that new gear there. That's really cool of you.
I'll
send you my address after the show.
And I've got one for everybody. So
Good.
It's my pleasure. I tell you what, I'll meet
buddy.
you. So I've got a funny aside. I got to do a little aside because you set me up too well. So I've got a buddy. In my other life, I'm the editorial director of a worship magazine. And so very unexpectedly, there's a guy that's in arguably the most famous worship outfit in the world. And so he comes to visit me, and he's coming from another country. And he's like, is there any way you can take me to Metallica HQ? Of all the things he wanted to see in the San Francisco Bay Area, he desperately wanted to go to Metallica HQ. So I thought that was hilarious. So in any case, I'll meet you over there with all this stuff. So
good. Perfect. I kind of started out in a little bit different world in the 90s with kind of more like sort of alternative rock acts like the Breeders and Hole and Veruca Salt, and then I kind of worked my way into live. I've worked with the Indigo Girls. I worked with Beck.
which Beck?
The stranger of the two, probably. Just Beck. And then I've also, let's see here, done a bunch of fill-in stuff. I worked with Maddie on Blue Man Group. I've done some TSO stuff. Filled in for a summer on Def Leppard and, all that kind of stuff. There's probably a couple more and I forgot, but.
Okay, I think there's only one person in the room that hasn't worked with Phil Collin. Is that correct? Adam, is that you?
I don't think I have yet.
I have not. Yeah.
Okay, but Mike Manning, you're coming up next. You did G3 together, and you did the G4 experience. So you didn't work for him, but you were working alongside, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I guess we're gonna head right over to Mike Manning now. So, so Mike Manning is, first of all, a lovely guy. San Francisco Bay Area. Mike and I have known each other for over 30 years, which is kind of crazy. At one point, Joe Satriani was auditioning rhythm guitar players, and I spent some time rehearsing. And I was doing the math today. We were over at Hun Sound in 1990.
Holy shit. Yes.
It was before Chrome Boy. It was before any of the stuff that happened with Joe after the Flying in the Blue View tour. It was an exciting time. And I was thinking, it's like, he was over there changing Joe's strings, and you've been with Joe forever, and he gets an amazing sound night after night. It's just so consistent. I'm so glad you could join us. I've never asked, how did you hook up with Joe?
Well, that's a long story. I'm from Boston. I worked for a bunch of local bands back there in the 80s, and John Butcher Axis, Johanna Wild, Fahrenheit, Charlie Farron, and Foghat. And then I kind of got burnt out, so I quit. I moved to California, soldering PC boards, working at Manpower, and some people from Boston said, "Hey, man, we got a gig for Satriani. Would you like it?" I was like, "No." 2 months later, they called again. And I said, "Yeah, I'm tired of this shit." And I did my 2-week trial period, and I've been stuck there ever since.
I love it.
Tried, man. Like 32 years.
That's nuts. That's awesome. Oh, wait a second. So did you do the Belly Up gig at Solana Beach after the NAMM show? 1987. So it was the first gig immediately.
I started in 88.
Okay.
I started on the Surfing with the Alien tour.
So well, that's awesome. We got lots to talk about. All right, John Zacco, say hello. How are you, first of all?
I'm great. How you doing?
I am doing great. We also had a lovely conversation, and rumor has it that you not only play guitar and shoot amazing photos, but you play an amazing guitar. So look forward to hearing you play. You've worked with a host of amazing folks as well. And again, like we were talking about before, you kind of came to Nashville and you're like, okay, I got a few bills to pay. A buddy asked you to tech, and here we are. So if you would be so kind as to, one, tell us a little bit about some of the folks that you've worked with, and two, tell us what it's like being a guitar player, because what I heard, you're like a guitar player's guitar player, but hanging out, working for another guy.
Oh, geez. Well, I've been with Phil for about 3 years now. Before that, I was with Tesla for a few years, working for Frank. I did Paul Gilbert and Billy Sheehan on the last Mr. Big tour. Billy and Richie Kotzen on the first Winery Dogs tour. I was with Dream Theater with Maddie for about 5 years, teching for John Mayung. Got some prog stuff like Neil Morris and Transatlantic stuff. Stone Sour, I did a run with them, and one-offs here and there. I've done some stuff with Sheryl Crow, but that mostly a lot of guitar geek kind of gigs.
Well, excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to showing off some of your photos as well. You take great photos.
Oh, thank you.
With pleasure. Adam Day, You know, it's interesting. You know, I'm a guitar player and a gear fan, and you know, your name has obviously been another one of the names that people speak about. You know, and one of the topics we're going to talk about is scale, and not the little graphic that you guys saw before with the modes on it. The idea is that, you know, in many ways, if you will, if you look at the influence of the player kind of on one side of the grid, I would have to say that there's probably no player more than Joe Satriani that's had a bigger sphere of influence in the modern guitar world. Like, you know, the number of people that would gleefully kiss the proverbial ring is huge, and you know, because he's Joe. The other end of the kind of the opposite kind of, if you will, side of the grid is these giant, enormous stadium tours. And you know, the folks that you work with, Neil Sean, you know, Angus Young, you know, Slash, you know, it's a stadium thing. And there's a photo that I'm going to show a little bit later of the Metallica stage, and you really begin to realize how different a stadium tour is from most other venues. And so that's one of the things I'm very excited to unpack. But the other thing is that, you know, working with guys that are like that, another part of it is that they're just musicians. So if you could say, you know, there's one thing, I know this is gonna be a little sideways, but I think you're gonna nail this, that, you know, guys like Angus, Neil, and Slash have in common when you show up at the gig, what would that thing be?
They want their guitar as soon as possible. Not unlike a lot of players for sure, but these guys want the guitar in their hands. You know, first thing.
And you know, we were talking about Neil. By the way, I brought a little prop, and somebody accused me once of a humble brag. So I hope I do not get accused of that tonight, because I'm passionate about gear and some of the people I've had the privilege to be around. In 1987, I demoed, and 1986, I demoed for Schoen Guitars. So I've known Neil a very long time. He gave me this guitar. He is one of my favorite guitar players. And years past, he invited me down to Gush Studios down in Oakland, which was the old Journey rehearsal place. I did some recording there. I literally recorded a 4-song demo all night long there. I have, you know, again, being from the San Francisco Bay Area, also grew up Journey. As a guitar player, because all you guys play, what's it like listening to a guy like Neil Sean play night after night after night?
Maybe the most consistent player night after night I've ever heard. You know, Scotty could probably attest to that. At least in my experience, the guy is, you know, if he has a bad night, that's only in his mind, and no one else would have a clue. You know, but he doesn't have bad nights. You know, he may have a whatever, something he wasn't particularly happy with, but you know, nobody else could tell. He's spot on every night.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other things that I wanted to do was kind of talk about a few of the unsung heroes. Scott, one of the points that you brought up was that in many ways, and actually without calling anybody out, because I wouldn't want it to be too first person, one of you guys brought up the point is that collectively you have a huge influence on the gear that actually gets produced, engineered, re-engineered, redesigned, and fixed so it can actually work in a situation that works for your guys, and ultimately that works for the general population. And there are some unsung heroes out there that kind of enable you guys to do what you do. I'm going to don my old man glasses so I don't leave anybody out. But I want to start with Ron Manelli, because I think if there's anybody that connects the dots in all those worlds, you know, the PBC 6X is a unit that I use, and he's just a brilliant guy. So who would like to kick things off, kind of talking about how Ron has kind of made your world easier and makes it so your artists can do what they need to do? Not everybody at once.
I'll start. You know, Ron is relentless in the pursuit of making his products better. And back when we started using the Mastermind foot controller, we were doing a programming session, and Matt Picone from Fractal was there, and had Ron on the phone writing new firmware in real time and sending it to us because we couldn't get the foot controller to do what we wanted it to do for a specific function. And that was pretty incredible. It was like 3 hours on the phone. It went into the middle of the night. And it just, that's the kind of guy that Ron is. He'll stop at nothing to get his gear to work to do what you need it to do.
I remember I sat on the phone with him one time when I was working with Alex Lifeson. When I first started there, Alex wanted to use his pedals that controlled the tri-axis, the Hughes and Kettner tri-axis models, but it was a D-sub connector that was a proprietary thing that only went out to their amps. So I got Ron on the phone, and he and I went through, and I was with my meter and all that stuff. And he actually sent me a box that would convert that signal like a week later. Just pet project of his. And it's just that type of level of detail and attention to detail and ability to move that quickly on building something like that that's indispensable for us.
I love it.
Yeah, that to me, I mean, that says it all about somebody like him. For us, you guys can all attest to this. Somebody is that concerned with taking care of us. It's so critical, certainly the artist, but and it's, we rely on people like that. We live by people like that. So he's one of the heroes for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ron is like he's a very calm voice when you're sort of freaking out a little bit, and it's an hour before showtime, and you're like, "What happened?" Like, why did I do that firmware update? Oh, I'm an idiot. And I mean, Matt Picone did that same thing with us when we were working out the axe effects. We had to go do the show we did in Antarctica. We couldn't take regular amps and all that stuff, so we'd wanted to try the axe effects, and so this was kind of forced our hand to do that. And Matt sat with us, and he was doing the same thing. He's like, okay, every 15 minutes we'd get a few things together and go, okay, here's what it's doing, here's what it isn't doing, we need it to do this, and then sit there and wait for the firmware update. And it would come in, and we'd dump it in, and we'd like, oh, that's it, finally it works. And without it, you just can't. A lot of this stuff isn't possible. And I always talk about this, that if the stuff doesn't work, if you get a piece of gear, I don't care if it's free or not. Like, if it doesn't work or doesn't say what it's supposed to do, it's just, it's trash to me. Like, I can't use it. It's just not useful. And some of this stuff is like, I don't know who owns who these days, large corporations buying up everybody else. And it used to be like, if you needed this from this company, you would call this guy. And now I wouldn't even know where to start, through a sea of, phone prompts and stuff to get a hold of people. Sometimes you just got to talk to somebody to get help.
Yeah.
So one of the conversations that I had today was kind of about, actually, hang on, sorry. Gosh darn it. There are a couple more unsung heroes. Matt Picone, obviously, another. Then there's Cooper Carter. I think everybody here knows Cooper Carter, right? So, John, was it you that was telling me about kind of how you first met Cooper?
No, I think it was me.
Who was it that knew Cooper? I guess his dad was in management.
Yeah. I've known Cooper. I've known the prepubescent Cooper Carter. As his father is a manager with my wife. They manage Indigo Girls and stuff, and so which is how I met all of them. And yeah, Cooper was, ever since a really young age, it's just like been super, just a sponge, and he would always always be playing his guitar, and always whenever time I'd come over, he'd be like asking me questions about guitar rigs and what do you guys do about this, and how do you do that, and what is this thing, and just wants all that information. And so it's been really cool to kind of end up in this parallel with him, and with the fractal stuff as well. So he's good. He's got a great ear.
That's awesome. So for those of you who don't know, Cooper is in many ways the Matt Picone extended field guy. And the thing that Cooper does pretty much for anybody that's a major touring act is he will actually embed. He'll show up basically taking an album or multiple albums worth of catalog and coming up with presets and showing up with basically set lists ready to go for people in case a situation where they don't have guys like you. Which is, and the other thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is that hang factor. And he has, he was on the thing that we did with John Petrucci and friends, and his ability to be, because he's as passionate about the music and the guitar playing as I am, but he can still do the hang thing and not lose his cool. That's a very unique skill to have. I also want to give a shout out to Gil Griffith. The H3000 was an iconic piece of gear. As I'm sure a number of people are going like, oh, I've got one over there in the corner. And, for those, who didn't know, basically Steve Vai went to Gil Griffith and said, can you build me a diatonically intelligent harmonizer? And Gil said, yeah. And that was the H3000. And, up until that point, the harmonizers were basically just parallel intervals. And if you're trying to play some sort of intelligent harmony, they just weren't capable of doing it. And that, that piece of gear really revolutionized a bunch of things. Steve Blucher. My guess is everybody in the room here has worked with Steve. Steve is the guy that, along with Larry DiMarzio, has reshaped, if you will, the sound of rock and roll. Not to slight, our friends in Southern California, the Duncans. They make great pickups, as Slash would tell you. But Steve Blucher is, first of all, a friend and relentless. And one of my favorite NAMM show stories is like Steve Vai was sitting in with Joe Satriani, and 30 minutes before the show, Blucher's got the pick guard off and is changing out the pickups because he's got a better pickup for him. Anybody got a good Blucher story? No. Okay.
That's the guy, yeah.
And of course, there's Larry DiMarzio, who really invented the replacement pickup market. Frank Aresti at Dunlop. Real musicians, real player, like John Petrucci used to go see Frank's band. And I'm totally blanking on the name, so please forgive me. Maddie?
Fates Warning.
Fates Warning, thank you very much. Real guitar player, great guy. And, everybody in this room, past or present, has worked with Dunlop. And, as long as we're going to say Frank Aresti, we can't leave out my buddy Brian Kehoe, who I've known since high school. So, the Dunlop guys, well, there's a couple of things coming that are going to be a little bit of fun. I hopefully we're going to get to the, what was it, the wah off, Chad? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were involved in that. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about the wah off, since we managed to meander there?
Oh, well, it just started with, kind of a whatever, Instagram or YouTube sort of person, character, if you will. And Mrs. Smith, and she sort of called out Kirk Hammett and said, you as a joke, just like, you think you're you think Kirk Hammett is the biggest abuser of the wah pedal. That's me. So there was some back and forth, just kind of having a little bit of fun. And then we just decided, hey, wouldn't this be fun to actually do, a fun wah off thing? And the Dunlop guys jumped right on it, and they had this huge wah pedal you can stand on built, and the whole thing, just because it was kind of fun. And I think, this was earlier in the year. I think that's actually the last gig we did before this whole shutdown thing. But, we sort of felt like, at least I felt like I was missing a lot of this kind of fun we used to have, like maybe things were getting a little too serious. So just to be able to kind of do something that was just absolutely just for fun and nothing else, it was definitely worth it.
That's awesome. Bob Bradshaw, a lot of, what we think of as a modern guitar rig started in his mind and got built into the boards that, were all over LA and all over the records that many of us were most influenced by. Just a great contributor. And so, all right, with that said, I would love if you guys could each kind of give, maybe just for people that are out there watching, maybe a tip on, and maybe, if I can ask you guys to riff, maybe on different things, and you just kind of go, hey, yeah, this thing and that thing and that thing. And I'll throw one in there. So I'm basically stealing Maddie's thunder, because one of the conversations we had was about modeling, and there are a number of folks that when they are creating their sounds with a modeling device, they're doing it with near field monitors, and they go out into a live performance venue, and they are taking something that worked in a near field, closed environment, and they're trying to introduce it to a live situation. And if they're going to run into a power amp, one of the things sometimes they don't think about doing, if that power amp's running into an actual 412 cabinet, especially if it's a tube power amp, is actually getting rid of the power amp modeling and the speaker modeling and the microphone modeling, because you're potentially going to run that power amp into a speaker cabinet and then mic that up for stage volume, which is, I think, one of the consistent challenges in getting an amp-like experience in a modeling like universe. So again, just if you're out there when we start playing live again, just experiment. And sometimes it's actually good to leave the amp model in there. Sometimes it just adds a little bit of something. So there's no one way, but that would be an area to start. Scott Appleton, what have you got for us?
Oh, geez, I knew you were going to call me first.
Yes.
Wow.
If you log out and log back in, you'll be in the lower right-hand corner. I'm just letting you know.
Gotcha. Hang on, I'm logging out here real quick. So, let's see. Quick tip. I don't know. Along the modeling thing, I guess, there's always the great debate about who's is the best and who's is right, and there is no right answer to that at all. It's all what your ear says, So, we all have our preferences. We all know what we like to work with, and some have certain advantages over others for different scenarios. But it's, my preferences, tend to run towards, obviously, with Matt and all those guys at Fractal, because it does the job every time and it's consistent. But yeah, I don't know. Go out and play your guitar.
I love it. Maddie?
Yeah, I kind of to second what Scott said, you can get really lost in the minutia of these new multi-processing units. And, I'll use the Fractal as an example. You can go into an amp block and go a couple pages in, and now you're changing windings on the transformers, and you're down to component changes, which you, as a guitar player, you would probably never do unless you're into that type of stuff. So just plug it in, find a preset that you like to listen to, and start playing and see what inspires you. And then after you get, into used to the sounds, then start getting into the deeper stuff. But you can get really lost in all of those little details that I don't necessarily think you need to. So
yeah, I would agree. I mean, all this stuff, there's guidelines, but no rules, you start off one way, but don't rule out something else, you never know what the guy's going to gravitate to sonically,
A lot of times too,
that's been my experience. Yeah.
A lot of times too, I find that my first decision was the right one. So I try not to dwell on things too heavily sometimes, because you just wind up going in a big poop anyway.
Yeah. The thing with the modeling aspect to me is like, fortunately, it's the language in there isn't really that foreign. If you just look at the basic blocks of it, I want a chorus. They model them after different choruses. Like, I used to have this pedal. Let's try that. I know this cabinet sounds like this. Let's try that. Let's try this head. We're familiar with these heads. Or let's use Mesa Boogie stuff to build our sounds, because that's what we've used in the past. So if you just sort of take those basic building blocks and start put your stuff together, it just sort of kind of comes together. If the sounds are there, it comes together a little bit more organically that way.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a reference also. When I was programming Phil's rig, when we switched to the AXFX 3, I pulled up one of their live records, and every few minutes would listen back and make sure I wasn't drifting. Because you can tweak a sound, and a half hour down the road, you're like, that that you completely off track of what you're doing, and you listen back to your reference and you've drifted into either an EQ decision that didn't work or an amp that didn't work. So always reference something that'll bring you back to your track that you're on to make sure you're in that. And also listen to it with a track. Just the other day, I was programming some stuff, and I would play a backing track and play along with it to see how it's sit in a mix as well, because you can get a great sound by yourself, but in a mix, it might disappear. So typically like a sound would be too high endy on its own, or you might think it's harsh, but in a mix, it sits and it cuts. So listen to it in a context too, as you're tweaking it.
Yeah, we tried
Good point.
when we first started out, we had all the gear set up, and I had my analog gear next to the fractal stuff, and we would A/B, and then I would listen to the left right out of the fractal through a pair of 2x12 Meyer wedges. So you had this kind of high fidelity thing, and then 10 feet away is a pair of 4x12s. So you could go listen here. What's front of house getting? What is the actual sound? Like you eliminate the power amp modeling by just listening to the cabinet and actual speaker compression, things like that. You have to continue to, because you go off in a direction. I mean, we tried, James was like, oh, this would be cool, man. We could get like the Master of Puppet sounds in here. And I said, yeah, we could. And I'll do that for you. But I already kind of knew it was like, if you copy it and do like a tone match on that exact sound and try and play through it in a rig on stage, it doesn't sound good at all. It's been compressed. It's been mastered. It is way too hi-fi. There's no mids in the stuff. And beyond that, there's no continuity through a live show if you were changing to the exact album sounds all the way through the set. Your front of house guy would lose his mind trying to catch up. So you have to come up with something that's just based on the analog gear that you used to use for their whole set, and then start there and then move forward. And we were kind of like, well, we want it to sound as good as the analog stuff. But after we kind of got going, we're like, well, actually, we could make this sound better than the analog stuff if we work with this in the right way. So yeah, you're right. That's super important to do that.
Yeah, we've gone in that circle several times.
I think we have.
Where you've got the old rig, and then you've got the new thing, and you're going back and forth, and yeah, it's really easy to get lost. So
Mike's like, hey, when this head sounds bad, I take it down and I put a different one up and plug it. That one, okay, good. And that's great, man.
Pedal, I just take it off the board and switch it with another one.
Exactly. Hey, man, there's a lot to be said for keeping it simple,
Absolutely.
Isn't that called analog modeling?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, that's hilarious. Adam, John, do you have anything you want to add to that, or are we sufficiently exhausted on that one?
No, I would agree with all that. I think certainly you run into the slippery slope with too many variables, and getting back to the axe effects, the parameters are so deep in that the deeper you go, possibly the further away you go from where you want, from what you want to what you want to do. So there's something to be said about the simplicity of keeping it simple. I can't tell you how many guitar players I've worked with who came up with a sound, for example, on their own, and said that's it, that's the sound. But putting it in context, this is a little different than what I was just speaking of, but putting it in a context of a band environment, it could be a completely different ball game, and so that's something you've got to really try to stay harnessed, keep a good grip on that. It's like throwing a parametric EQ into your rig, and you'll spin around in circles for hours and come back and say, what the hell did I do there? And you pull it out and it sounds better than it ever did.
Yeah, there it is. Yep. That's it. Yep. That's the sound.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. John, what do you got for us?
Well, I just like I said before, just I brought up the reference thing, just listening.
Oh, sorry,
back
my bad. Sorry,
no problem, no problem.
I managed to disconnect my camera in the midst of connecting the
Yeah,
drive
yeah,
with
we
all
saw
the
you went away there.
photos. So it's just like it's like this world's smallest pedal board, this little interface over here. So if you accidentally pull the wrong cable or jiggle it, basically everything goes down. So
Yeah, that's never happened to us.
no, you're professionals.
Stay away from that one.
Oh, there we go. So I've got to go to a photo here because this really sums up kind of the next bit of this. Let me make sure I've got the right mouse, and I do. Okay. Now, hopefully, in a perfect world, this is going to work perfectly. All right. So I'm going over to Finder. Tell me, no, wait, no, I don't want Finder. No, I want Preview. There we go. All right. So when I saw that photo, I kind of went, their scale.
I don't think we're seeing what you're seeing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on.
That is a scale. But
there we go. It is a scale.
Mixolydian for 100.
It's the mix. What are the notes in the B Mixolydian mode? Okay, hang on. Sorry. Let me shoot this back upstream. Here we go. And let's see. I'm going to send you that. Okay, good. All right, good.
Yeah, there we go.
You guys are seeing that, and everybody's downstream seeing it. Okay, I saw that photo, and Chad Brett is the name of the photographer. What's his last name?
Murray.
I've never seen concert photos at a venue that big shot like this guy shoots his photos. It's staggering, the quality of the photos. So that said, thank you for sending those along. Really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Look at the flipping size of that stage.
Yeah, that's like 180 feet wide on the downstage edge, somewhere in there.
I mean,
Wow.
like, hang on, let me unshare that. So I've got to unshare multiple things here. So there we go. All right, we're back in the real world here, and we're back with you guys. Hang on a second. Let's go back to Zoom. There we go. Okay. Hi. I saw that photo, and it really kind of allowed me, kind of a minute ago, I talked about this grid where kind of there's the artists, and then there's the scale. And I made an analogy, and hopefully nobody's going to get offended when I say this. I love Costco, and I love Whole Foods. Joe Satriani is the Whole Foods of the music world. You're going to get fed in a way that is just this thing. And, you know, at the same time, I love going to Costco. I love going to a stadium and arena show. And so, you know, Chad and Adam in particular, one of the things that Maddie brought up was, you know, there is this scaling thing that happens where, you know, Chad, when we spoke, you mentioned like, hey, you know, the Metallica guys, they'll be in the middle of making a record, and you know, the right offer will come in. They'll get on an airplane, they'll go do a gig. It's not as if they're taking their tour, their stadium and arena tour, and that see you in a sec, Mike, and that rig that's out there and just doing it. It's from scratch, kind of over and over. That scale and that capacity to scale like that means that your variables are all over the place. And, you know, Adam, the same thing. I mean, you know, in many ways, I think your tours, if you will, are perhaps in a sense a bit more predictable in that they're stadium and arena acts. So I'm going to start with you, Chad. What is it like having to scale and kind of, you know, really the success to failure ratio? You've got to have, you know, an extremely high success rate because that's what people expect. How do you manage that? How do you cope with it? And please illuminate, because that stage is ridiculous.
Yeah, if we're gonna continue to talk about gear, it was really a game changer when we really settled into the fractals, because we have two different systems. We've had more, but generally we have two whole systems, different, usually a hemisphere doing something. So to be able to take your exact sounds and your updates and settings and everything from one system, get on a plane and go to the other hemisphere, whatever you're doing, put it in and have it sound exactly the same, just never used to happen. I mean, we used to have two analog live rigs, and you would go to one system and do a show on that, and you'd be like, hey, this sounds pretty good. It has this, it has that. And then you go to the other rig, and it's like, wow, this sounds completely different. especially when you're wearing in-ears, all of that stuff is now right here. You're not standing behind, a wall of cabinets just kind of hoping it sounds good. It's got to sound exactly the same, because the guys know. So getting to the Axe Effects thing was repeatability is the biggest thing. I want I want my stuff to sound exactly the same every night. Even like it's such a time saver too, because I don't have to go through all my pedals, check the 1/4 inch cables and the power and everything, because you had to load in across cobblestone streets and everything, and you don't know kind of what condition your gear is in after being on a truck for 48 hours trying to get somewhere. And to be able to just plug in and go, okay, if I had the lines working and everything, especially if you're under pressure or stress for time or something, to be able to just plug that stuff in real quick and go, boom, okay, you're off and running, and have the confidence that the stuff is going to sound just like it did yesterday. And the biggest thing I noticed was, with working with Big Mick, the front of house guy, because a lot of these outdoor shows, we're picking up racks and stacks, the PA, but we're carrying everything else, the monitor rig, front of house control, and all that. But the PA system is kind of different every day. It can even be the same exact gear, and he's still going to find this is wrong. Change this, do that. You're in a different environment, the weather's different, and all that. But it went from a lot of, can you do this with James' guitar? Can you try this? Can you try a little bit of that? Take this out. You could do that for an hour. And now Mick knows exactly what's coming down those lines. If he brings it up in the PA and it's not there, it's not working for him, he's now turning around to his sound techs and going, hey, do this, do that, rather than getting on the talkback mic and running me through circles just to get the guitar to sound good. It's like, hey, bud, this is exactly the same as you had it yesterday. There's no like, oh, the power's different here, or we have 50 hertz or 60 cycles power here. Is it the generators? What is it? There's all these things that people can start to kind of like, make up in their mind that something is wrong somewhere. And with this gear, man, it's just like, and having a stage that wide, the whole wireless situation was another hurdle. I mean, I think if I'd learned more about wireless equipment, frequencies, how to manage all that stuff, antennas, I mean, and that stuff just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And
yeah, I will attest to that. That's maybe the biggest challenge of stadium tours, aside from weather.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
RF, the first stadium tours I did 30 years ago, I was using UHF equipment and trying to get that stuff to cover a stage. Crazy. So it's still a challenge. You've got to,
sure is.
You make best friends with the RF coordinator the first day.
When we never even had one until the last few days, and it was such a like it was just such a relief to have somebody come by and then monitor it throughout the day and everything. You're just like, and then you have somebody to call if something goes wrong. Hey, get over here.
It was the old days. You'd have to just turn everything on and see what worked and what didn't.
Try and keep all your guys in the same group. Like, okay, backline, we're in this kind of range. We're gonna keep in the same group of channels. But we had at one point we had 3 different manufacturers of wireless gear. We weren't doing ourselves any favors there. So getting all that stuff up to speed, and then again, if you roll into a gig, we can set the transmit packs to high power or medium or regular power if we go back indoors, so we're not stepping on all the other transmitters and stuff. But the scale is there. My rack is the same size. We may or may not use 4x12s, or you're in the round, you're outdoors, but to have your little rack together that exactly how it sounds and exactly what it's supposed to do. Everything else that's changing around you, just let it change. You can't do anything about it, but you know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing with us with the exactly the same. It's Phil's rig is everybody's rig in the band now is Axe 3, so it's the same every day. There's no variables for many of us. So just like Chad was saying, if there's something off, it's not us. It's something else, because they're getting the same signal from us every day. no matter what. So it's
Yeah.
been amazing. And we've got 3 rigs. We got A, B, and a C.
Yep.
And a couple of years ago, we had all 3 rigs out. So flying from A rig shows to B, it's a simple matter of plugging the computer into the Aspects, dumping your A rig presets in with all the tweaks you've done on that last leg, jumping to the C rig, doing the same thing. You plug it in, it's all there. It's just, yeah, it's
10
nuts.
minutes. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know,
Same with the RJM stuff too, with the masterminds. Same thing. Just you plug in the USB stick, there's your stuff. It's ready to go.
That's what I hated about the ground control. It was just, there was no MIDI, there was no librarian or anything. And I just kept asking those guys. And when I worked for Garbage, I should have mentioned those guys. I was putting the set list in order every day. So all he had to do was hit the down button to the next song, not the up button. So I was sitting there just
your hands are sore from doing it.
Up here and just, and then God forbid somebody come up to you and ask you a question, you'd be like, "Oh no, what was I doing?" But yeah, when Manelli's thing came out and they brought it down, it was like, tell me you have some software for this, and then from there we can go anywhere. Because I mean, you know, again with the Garbage gig, it was my first gig where, oh man, I get to plug my computer into all this stuff, and I really enjoyed that because it was a new challenge. It was new. Everything was new. Like, hey, let's, you know, line 6 stuff, and wow, we're really going to do this. No speakers on stage, and I really love it. And to be able to continue to do this on a super deep level with the Axe effects and everything else, I love it.
All right, I'm going to jump in for a quick second because I pulled up Adam's photos, so I just wanted to show these real quick because they deserve to be shown, and I'm attempting to play video VJ. So let's see if I can actually pull this off and pull up the right thing this time. There we go. And then I need to send that over to you guys as well. So let's see how we do. There we go. All right. And there we go.
I just want to say, I think I misspoke earlier. I said, I was talking about the wireless. It was VHF in the old days, which was very challenging to cover a full stadium stage. Anyway.
Yes. Noted. Who's that guy? So those guitars, I mean, you know, so one of the things that, you know, we've all kind of chatted about a little bit is that, you know, I think we're all guitar fanatics, but we're also fans of the players. So, you know, just to be there with those guitars, Adam, I take it that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was, you know, certainly the awe factor, but, you know, when you get right down into it, I mean, Angus is a great guy, but it's, you know, if you lose sight of the of what it is, you really just got to focus on the job and you know, take away the enormity of it, I suppose, you know. So, you know, it had its challenges. It was a simpler kind of thing. They're simple guys. They work simple, but it certainly had its challenges in different ways.
So I don't, I didn't do my diligence and put together one of the amp shots that I've seen, but in terms of amps, those guys have amps. There's another guy that has a few amps as well. That guy. So sorry, everybody here probably knows whose rig that is, but just for the sake of conversation, that is of course Neil Sean. So
that was a pre-production. You know, that was a smaller pre-production. Scotty can attest, but the earlier days.
Yes, I can.
Remember the Cadillac?
Oh yeah.
You know,
oh yeah.
There were 3 mono signals and 2 stereo, and it was chaotic. But always a fun challenge, you know.
Yeah.
Scott?
Yeah.
Is that the cabinet rack in the back that you built, or is that something different?
That is something different. That looks like a speaker cabinet back there to me.
Okay, all right. And then we have, speaking of rigs, let me see if I can make that bigger. There we go. And there's another photo of that I've got somewhere. But just a little bit of gear. That's a lot of stuff to manage. And one of the things that we'll kind of end up going over, it's just kind of the management and the prep side of this. But as I close out of this, I want to head over to Mike Manning for a minute. So, the interesting thing is that, Joe Satriani's, let me get out of here. No, I want to end screen sharing. Hang on. Stop share. There we go. And I want to end screen sharing over here. Good.
Hey, Doug, may I just say, well, I remember I've always wanted to bring this up with Mike. I grew up in the East Bay. I might have told you some time ago, but my favorite band growing up, I guess in high school, was a band called the Squares.
Oh, I never saw the Squares.
Yeah, it was, Doug knows who they are, I'm sure.
What do you mean you grew up in the East Bay?
Hold on a second.
Yeah, I grew up in the East Bay and spent a lot of time at Keystone Berkeley. So the Squares, it was Joe.
Oh, look at that.
There you go.
Wow.
It was
Mikey
it was
on the
a
spot.
three-piece power pop band. They all sang, but it was a Van Halen guitar player in these pop songs. It was like it was unbelievable for 1978, 79.
So wait a second, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Fremont.
I'm in Orinda. So
Oh,
and I'm still in Orinda until
Yeah.
all of you, well, not all of you, but most of you, until I moved to Nashville, right? So Mike, oh, that's great. No, so I grew up going to see, Alan Holdsworth at the Keystone Berkeley. I don't know if you saw Holdsworth and that series of shows. He hit the Stone, Keystone Berkeley. But do you remember Jimmy Acevedo?
yes, I do.
So at the
House
Holdsworth,
Sound at Berkeley.
there you go. So Jimmy was Joe was up in the crow's nest for the Holdsworth show back in the Squares era days, watching the Holdsworth show up there with Jimmy. So sorry, a little East Bay thing, but that's
Yeah.
awesome.
We'll get.
Scott and I,
I'd love to continue later.
We'll have
Scott
to.
and I grew up around cows and breweries.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, it's a funny thing, and I'll get to some other photos here, and then we're on the Joe topic, so it's perfect. I went to Berkeley High School. I live in a suburb called Orinda, and I desperately wanted to escape the suburban vibe. So I decided I was going to go to Berkeley High School, and kind of within the first week or so of being there, everybody was like, "Oh, you play guitar? You should go check out this guy Joe," because he was just the guitar teacher at the local music store. So I was like, I don't know, I guess so, sure, So 1978 actually, no, it was 79. Mike Manning. So the funny thing is with all this, and Joe does have a fractal in his rig, but one of the things we talked about earlier is that. And I actually I love this because it's been one of the things that I really have noted about Joe is that I think part of the magic, and every artist is different and they have their own thing, but especially with somebody that is willing and is daring to have a bunch of people walk out on stage, and it's going to vary from city to city, or it will be Steve Vai and John Petrucci, and actually just going, all right guys, let's do this. That takes a certain amount of confidence and a certain amount of calm and a certain amount of courage, because you don't necessarily want to have a bad night next to John Petrucci and Steve Vai. Just saying. So Joe's ability to read the moment, read the room, and read the sound of the room, and work the room sonically is uncanny. And in no way to slight kind of the different experiences what you're talking about. Part of that magic is actually being able to manipulate that tube amp circuitry, to work with a JVM, to work with a board where, like we talked about, if something breaks, and you mentioned it, there's a suitcase somewhere that all that stuff fits in. You just pull out another pedal. If the Act Effects goes down, there's probably 2 or 3 time machines that are just sitting back in the back there. You're like, we'll run them in series and we're good. So, I would love to hear your take on kind of like, especially for people that are out there who are kind of like, I really like the old school vibe. And I'm going to dig up a photo of some of Joe's stuff in just a moment while you're kind of unpacking that. But can you tell me kind of what kind of the joy of this, of this, and a couple of people already said, sometimes keeping it simple is the solution. What does that mean to you? Just kind of watch what Joe, it's kind of like down home cooking, except he can cook anything, right? What's that like for you, working with somebody and kind of the magic of that chemistry that he does what he does, and you're part of that?
Well, I like the fact that he keeps everything simple, I'm like 64 years old. I'm not really in all that high tech shit, So the fact that it's all simple to me is great, And he actually gets his own sound. I really have nothing to do with getting his sound for him, He dials in his own sound. I mark the amps, I mark the pedals, just make sure it's all kosher and we're good, And sometimes a pedal might sound funky. I'll switch it out. But yeah, I call myself the maintenance guy.
Well, you've been,
That's a gift, and that's critical to our gigs. Consistency. Whether you get the sound or not, keeping it consistent for your guy once he's got his sound is, especially in a tube amp environment, which there's a lot of variables when you go from venue to venue with tube amps. So, that's a gift to be able to do that, Mike. Keeping that consistency, that.
I think
I like it.
I think you're the longest tenured guy in the room. I think you're the longest guy on the gig and on the rig.
I'm probably the oldest too.
I'm giving you some competition. All right, I got to throw up some more photos here. So let's see if I can do this without having.
I guarantee you though that no matter what the gear is, we all are pouring drinks and putting out towels and looking after all the other little minutiae.
Yeah, that's a big part of it also.
It's not comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, to make the artist comfortable. I think I've done a pretty good job at that, obviously, and I fuck up once in a while.
Don't we all?
All right, guys, this is good.
For my fuck ups.
Well, all right, I've got a bunch of great photos. So part of this is I want to show some photos and we can chat about this. Then I want to get back to the main event, which is you guys. But this is relevant. So let me share over to preview, and then let me make sure that you guys can actually see what I'm sharing. So give me a moment. And here we go. And there we go. And good, I haven't destroyed anything yet. All right. I think you guys know these guys.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm going to keep the preview window on the side so I don't do something stupid.
Yeah.
So, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Come back here. So,
okay.
The great thing is that, Mike, the interesting thing about Joe is that you can see that he's got the second JVM. The JVM on the far left is not Joe's. The two in kind of on the inside are Joe's. One's on, one's off. But the entire time that you were manning that, this is the G4 experience. Obviously, Tommy Emmanuel, Joe, and Phil, and then Stu Ham. And that'd be Jonathan Mover somewhere directly behind Joe and Phil. So, you guys kept striking that second Marshall so people had stage room. That was really courteous. That doesn't always happen. Props. All right, this is a fun one. So this is Joe actually going through the guitars from Surfing, and I figured there'd be enough Satriani geeks out there. They would flip and love that. So that was
sitar.
Yep.
Yes.
So it's not an actual choral, it's a wannabe choral, but it's just the same. Speaking of the
guitar.
There you go. Speaking of the guitars from Surfing. All right, the one in the front's not from Surfing, but for those of you who go way back in Joe World, from back to front, that's the Rubina guitar that was on the cover of Guitar Player. The wannabe choral sitar. Adam, the third from the back is the Black Boogie Bodies guitar that used to have a pair of Duncans in it, a Duncan Custom, I think, and then maybe a 59. That was the Squares guitar.
Oh wow!
Wow. In front of that is the Kramer that Not of This Earth and Surfing were recorded on, because Ivan has happened afterwards. And I have the original Schaller pickups that were in there because Joe took them out and hated them, and he just left them at the store. I've still got them in my pickup pile, and I don't want to ask how many pickup piles you guys have got. And then there's kind of the whatever it was, the 30th anniversary Satriani one. All right, so here's the interesting thing. There's the Satriani board, and a kind of, you can see the controller there for the fractal down at the end. But basically anything that's on there that could break, you just pull it off and you replace it out of a suitcase. I love that. Very easy, Mike. Done.
Yeah.
All right.
How do
Go
you
ahead.
like duct tape holding that board down?
So the interesting thing is, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit trail, but I do want to have a moment, just kind of, I love poking fun about the solderless cables. So basically, there's not a cable on Joe's rig. Pretty much, it's not a D'Addario solderless cable. And for all the noise that happens about, oh, you can't use a solderless cable, Joe's tone is not sucking.
Those cables are great, actually.
Yep. Oh, and whose is that? Huh. So a little bit of rock and roll there. All right. So, and then there's Phil giving a master class. And here's the interesting thing about Phil, and props to him. There are the two JVMs, Stu Ham's bass rig, Paul Gilbert's half stack, and then Phil at that point was playing with these two small little combos for the gig. He did, he could have bought the entire venue that this thing was done at, but there he is with these very humble amps. He didn't come into the room with an attitude. Just a lovely guy, and he can back it up when he plays. It's just pretty darn cool. Set list, the Tommy thing. All right, so I'm going to segue into this guy, but I'm going to bring everybody into the mix. There's a little RJM. I think we recognize that guy. And speaking of rigs, if that doesn't raise your blood pressure just a little bit, you're watching the wrong stream here, folks. I'm just saying. But this is one of my favorite topics right here. So this is Chef Petrucci, and at the JPGU guitar camp, John basically made burgers and dogs for every one of the campers, and the teachers as well. And so the thing about John that is kind of amazing is he's got the gift of hospitality, and that's a pretty special thing. So what I want to talk about that I think is relevant to this conversation. Oh, sorry, hang on. Nope, I want to unscreen share, and you guys should have me. Okay, good. I made a note here because unfortunately it's kind of true. You only hear about guys when they're either on stage, out of the band, in rehab, in jail, or whatever. I would love it, like the Petrucci barbecuing for everybody at the flippin' camp. I would love a story about one of your guys that is the nice guy story that nobody hears about, and just kind of go, they're known for their guitar playing, but they're actually amazing human beings. I think there's not enough positivity in the world, and I would love to hear some good guy rock and roll stories. Scott, you're in the upper left.
Man, I got to head right to Alex Lyson because, Alex has had a lot of great endorsements over the years, particularly like with the Houston Kentner amps back in the day, and then the Lurch amps. And I don't think anybody knows that Alex doesn't take a dime out of any of that, including all of his Gibson guitars too. He actually donates every penny of that to charity. And I think that's a really cool thing to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maddie, I stole your burger. What else you got? Come on, John gets a second round.
That's just the kind of guy he is. He loves teaching people about the guitar. And the great thing about him is he knows what he wants, and he knows how to articulate that. And he loves to share that information with people. So, the guitar camp was, when we first did it, was unbelievable. We weren't sure what to expect, but it was just like, it was like being in a beehive of knowledge, and he just enjoyed the hell out of it. So it was good.
Love it. Chad, what you got for us?
Oh, I signed the NDA. No, I'm just kidding.
Dude, you can't say any of the good stuff, right?
Yeah, everything's perfect. No, it's I think what people often wonder about is like, oh, you know this guy, what's he like? And to a lot of fans, this is like their hero, musical hero, or it's their lyrics, or in a lot of cases, your music saved my life, and they're really important to this person. So whenever I'm asked that question, I'm kind of real careful because you're sort of dealing with people's hopes and dreams in a way. And, you know, I wouldn't say anything about James that wasn't untrue, but he was first described to me as a real gentleman. And that's kind of the best way I can say it. He is one of the guys that will, you know, kind of take in the crew in consideration. Like, oh, I know you guys have been here for X amount of hours. We'll get our thing done and get off the stage. You know what I mean? Sometimes you don't find that. You know, they're all kind of wrapped up in what they're doing, and you're just kind of, you know, relegated to the outskirts of what's happening. But I mean, the band Metallica definitely has a lot of, you know, philanthropy and music cares and different situations like that. That's always nice stuff to see, because that's the kind of feedback that I see, that people forward me something from an Instagram post or whatever kind of thing it is, like the band gave X amount of dollars to whatever kind of cause, and you know, Mike and we've done this thing with Sammy Hagar and Joe Satriani and Hetfield and a whole bunch of other people. The gig in San Francisco that we do, we've done like the Bridge School thing with Neil Young and the I can't remember what that's called, but you know, the guys, it's important to them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That gets us to Joe Satriani.
You know,
See, everybody loves Joe. He lets the other guy solo. I mean, that's serious. Like, he could literally play, and everybody would like, well, it's Joe. He doesn't have to let him solo. So, Mike, give us a Joe story.
Well, I don't have a real story other than, you know, Joe is he's very passionate about what he does. He was a teacher. I think he's still a teacher. You know, he's a wicked nice guy. That's all I can say. Some people think, oh, he must be a jerk or something. He's a nice guy. He's the greatest, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I'll take that raise. Thank you.
There we go.
Mike, I want to know, like, do you keep like an extra pair of his like trademark sunglasses? You got to have like,
oh yeah, there's
all times, right?
Yeah, there's a pair lying around sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'll say, here, keep these for me, will you?
Yeah, there you go.
Get my sunglasses.
Spares. You got to have spares.
Spare sunglasses.
Hey, no, I can't ask that. Sorry, no. Good behavior.
It goes in the suitcase with the pedals.
What's that?
Huh?
And do you still keep some time machines in the back there?
Where?
In case there was, you know, do you have? Let's just say your power supply and all the power to the pedal board failed. Do you have an extra time machine that you could throw into the loop out there that's just kind of hanging out in the back?
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, in fact, we used the time machine in January for a couple of one-offs with Steve Vai. But Joe actually only played straight into his amp with a delay. No wah-wah pedal, no nothing.
Guys still do that?
Yeah. Believe that?
Sorry, that was me having just a little bit of fun. John Zacco? Hang on a second. I gotta give you a photo moment because you've got some great photos here. So before we jump into this next thing, wait, let me make sure I've got the right preview window open here, because you were also kind enough to send along some great photos, and I think they tell a story. Adam, did you see Kiss and Cheap Trick at the Cow Palace in '76?
I saw him at the. Yeah, that was '77. That was a Love Gun tour, and I was there for that. I saw him in '76 at Coliseum on the Destroyer tour. But Cheap Trick was my favorite band from the first album, and they got just about booed off the stage opening for Kiss in '77.
You and I were at the same show at the Cow Palace. My mom took me. The Love Gun tour. That's awesome. All right. That's sorry, I'm geeking.
That was
out.
a rock show for sure.
That was a rock show. My mom, the concept of Gene Simmons spitting blood she didn't quite get it. Sharing this guy. Okay, let me get into Zoom and let me share that. And there we go. All right, here we go. Finder. Zoom eCam. There we go. All right, everybody should be seeing the same thing. Speaking of Cheap Trick, as I was looking at all these lovely guitars, I'm like, wait a second, I know those cabs.
Yeah, that was on the UK tour in 2018 when we did a whole run with Cheap Trick, and that was great to watch those guys every night. And Phil and I talked about doing a little shoot. There's some other great pictures from that little shoot we did with him and Rick and a couple of Rick's classic guitars. So I wanted to get everybody's classic, iconic guitars together and do a quick little shoot after sound check one day. So that was my favorite. I got to Phil just with Crackle from the Hysteria tour. That's the original Destroyer from Pyromania, and Bella, of course, which just got refretted, I guess. It is pretty amazing right now from what he was saying. So.
And by the way, and we're going to have talk about strings. I'm a little bit fixated on strings. Kind of everybody in unison. Phil's high E string is a what gauge?
13. 13. They hurt.
That's a manly man. Let's see. Let me get the right shot here. There we go. Speaking of a large venue, and that's a great shot there, dude. Holy cow, is that lovely?
Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And this one is just like, speaking of scale, it's like, holy flipping cow, dude. So
yeah, we did a handful of stadiums on that run with Journey, and we're supposed to do all stadiums this summer, and everybody knows what happened to that. So
moving right along. Then there's this guy.
Yeah, that was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony last year. Where Brian came out and inducted them, and then they played the Mott the Hoople song. And Brian's another iconic guy that's super, super nice. I mean, sweet guy, just, amazing dude. And smart, too. He's pretty smart as well.
And I guess you have to be an astrophysicist or whatever the heck he is.
Yeah. I remember reading an interview with him where he said when he got his PhD, he said it was finally about time to do something with all the papers in the attic. So
I love it. So I also learned something, I think from Scott, it was that you that told me this, is that Phil plays, he moved from stainless to brass guitar picks, but it's the Brian May influence. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually that sort of influenced them to use metal picks to begin with. So.
Speaking of Bella.
Yeah, there it is.
All right, let me get, and then there's a splatter. And then anybody see the pawn shop episode?
Oh yeah,
that was awesome. And then this is the previous rig.
That's G3. Yeah, we he opted to go for just a straight up Black Star rig. And like we were talking about simple rigs, that was it. He had a wah pedal and that was it, straight in.
I love it. And then there's this.
Yeah, that's our current A rig, and that's it. And the B and C rigs are pretty much identical to that. So
from this,
yeah,
to this, that kind of says it all. Right, I saved the best for last. There we go.
Yeah, there it is. That's the one. He brought it out in London on the UK tour. It was at his house, I guess, there, and he wound up using it every night on the encore. So it sounded great. It needed a little TLC on the Kaler and little setup, but it still sounds great. And it was pretty cool to open the case and look at that thing. Oop. And that's a guitar you grew up seeing, so it was kind of a trip. And that's in the Hall of Fame right now, along with the Crackle one. So
that's awesome. I absolutely have forgotten what question. Oh, we were on the nice guy story. Right. So, it's you now, right? Yeah, John, give me a nice guy story.
Oh man, I was talking to you earlier today, and how my friends will joke that I've wound up getting the nicest guy in any band that I work for. So yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I really haven't had to deal with anybody really bad. Phil, obviously, I mean, Scotty will agree, is just the nicest guy. You know what I mean? What you see is what you get. He's just down to earth. He takes time with fans. On the G3 tour, my family came out, and my niece, my little niece Bella, had to sing at some function coming up, and she happened to mention it to him. She didn't even know who he was, and he's like, "Oh, well, you got to do this." And I looked over, and he was like talking to her about singing and how to do it, and getting in her face. And he goes, "You got to just sing." And that's who he is. He takes the time with people. All the guys. Working for Billy Sheehan, Billy would, after a Winery Dog show, would seek out, if anybody was waiting behind a barricade somewhere, he would find them and go and sign. He would make sure he got out, found anybody that wanted signatures, and make sure that everybody got their stuff signed. Everybody, I've been pretty lucky. They're all nice. Hopefully that won't change anytime soon.
That's awesome. Adam, who you got for us?
Well, I can add on to that by saying, for the people out there watching this or listening to this, to find artists like that to work for is a real treat, because they're not all like that. A lot of them are, but not all of them are. And when you find guys like that, Neil is certainly one of them. And I've been lucky, at least recently, the last 15 years or so, 20 years, whatever. But they're not always like that. And when you find guys like that and you work for a band like that, I'll tell you something, the music sounds better too. Somehow mysteriously, some of those songs that you didn't really care for at the beginning start to sound better. There was a Slash story I always loved, and it got out there, but of course he was always a big Aerosmith, Joe Perry fan, and he used to talk about this poster he had on the wall with Joe playing this 59 Tobacco Burst, and Joe's ex-wife ended up selling it, during his heyday of fun, whatever it was. Anyway, Slash got an offer in the early 90s, probably not, I think 1990, from a dealer who had the guitar, and of course he jumped on it, and not anywhere near the cost that it is today, of course, but still pretty high, so he bought it, and eventually used it on the records and used it live a couple times, but eventually Joe found out, and Joe and him have always been friendly, and Joe found out and had been pestering about it to kind of get it back, and Slash just loved the guitar, and he wasn't going to give it up. But at one point before Joe's birthday, I don't know if it's 50th birthday, it was some time ago, he said, would you wrap that guitar up, box it up, and send it to Joe for his birthday? And so that story got out in the press, but it was always pretty impressive to be part of that. 1959 Les Paul that Slash worshipped, giving it back to his idol. Pretty cool.
Oh,
Cool.
It's lovely. All right, let's get tweaker. All right, one of my favorite stories that Maddie told me was being in the studio with John, literally spending an entire day in the live room, sitting there, getting guitar. Like, your average rock record, they spend a day getting drum tone. They spend a couple of hours, setting up a 57 and a 121. All right, we got guitar tone, or they set up, the axe effects. But with John, it's just like the right speaker, the right cabinet, maybe a couple of different cabinets. And hey, so the idea of, and so Richard Cheeky, there's an interview with him on Sweetwater, and he was saying, John, spends an entire day face directly in front of the speaker, which is again a common mistake that most guitar players make. They dial in their tone with the amp pointing at their knees instead of going what their amp actually sounds like. Not that I've ever done that, of course. But the idea is you sat there literally for basically an entire day in the studio. That takes a tenacity. It also is a level of embeddedness that you have with John. I would love it if you could kind of unpack And I love it if each of you can kind of talk about your own version of that, because it may not necessarily be in the studio. One of my favorite things that we all talked about is that in some ways, and I mean this most affectionately, you're guitar therapists. You're there on the guitar player's best days where you're celebrating their highs, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, blah, 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 blah. But you're also there on the day, musicians are human. They have a bad day. They know they're not playing their best. They feel badly. The expectation is high. You know, when you're famous, people, you know people are coming. Again, a guy like John Petrucci, people expect the best that they've heard of John on the album with his best takes with every note he plays. That is a very high level of execution. And with Metallica, again, those guys just crush it year in, year out. You don't expect to see anybody miss anything. So what I loved is that you're right there with him through that process. And again, as you guys unpack that, part of it is like how you work with the artist and how you learn to kind of be, if you will, their second set of ears, how you learn to interact with them. Because this is one of the other things that we all talked about, and I want to share this with the people that are out there. First of all, everybody has bad days, and all of us are probably at our personal best at every level on our bad days. And sometimes we're not always great to the people around us in the process, or sometimes we just beat up on ourselves or whatever variation or all of the above. And so understanding the relationship, these guys do a heck of a lot more than just change strings. That enables these artists to actually be who they are is an important part of why I was really excited to have this group of professionals in the room together. So you can really kind of go, oh, right, they do way more than I might have known or imagined. But again, as it relates to working with John, Maddie, you're there 24/7. You talked about the ideas like you'll sit there in a sound check. And, you know, that relationship of knowing how to engage somebody who is that serious about what they're doing. The standard is that high, but also be able to weigh in at the right time with the right way to help them navigate that thing. That's a very unique relationship. So one, I'd love it if you can unpack kind of what it's like working with John in the studio in an appropriate way. And also kind of the nuance of the relationship that allows you to have that sphere of influence to be more than a guy that just changes strings.
Well, you know, I've been working for John I started working for Dream Theater 20 years ago, and I've been full time with John now for I think 12 years. I think I said, and it kind of I think everybody's touched on it. You know, it's when you find that guy to work for, it's great because you've got probably mutual interests, but you also have mutual respect for each other. And, you know, yeah, you become a sounding board, you become, you know, the cheerleader, you become the therapist, you become everything, you know, and sitting in the studio, it you know, it can get a little unnerving sometimes sitting in a studio with a guy with his head in a speaker cabinet and just going chunk, chunk, twist a knob, chunk, chunk, twist it. But that's the process, you know? So you have to accept that that's the process and you go with it. And, you know, as you work for somebody for a while and you get more and more in tune with what they want, then it becomes a lot easier to hear what they're doing. And then you can say, you know, yeah, maybe you went a little overboard on the low end on that one or something, or, you know, you have a little bit more leeway to weigh in on stuff. So, but again, it's just getting in tune with the guy. And, you know, all of us have had to do that probably at some point or another in a very quick manner. You know, you get thrown in on a gig for whatever reason that you weren't there the day before, and you've got to be in tune quick. So, because at the end of the day, the ultimate thing is they need to be able to go out and perform and not think about anything else. You know, you walk out on that 180-foot wide stage, you don't want to be thinking about, is my guitar going to work? You need to go out there because you're in a stadium full of people. And that's all you need, you know, that's all you need to think about. So, yeah, I mean, it's just getting in tune with the person that you're working for.
Big part.
Couldn't agree more. It's, you know, it's probably true in a lot of vocations and dealing with your employers, our business probably some more eccentric personalities than your average, occupation.
That's an
Other than
So
perhaps politics,
navigating, so navigating the personalities, I can't say enough about that, how critical that is, and you guys all know that. It's when it really calls for a no, you can't really say no. But I've always considered myself as a facilitator. I want to be able to give him the most viable options I can. I want him to make the decision based on the options I can give him, the intelligent options, hopefully, that I can offer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've just been dealing with this with some projects that we have going on, and you just have to be able to present every option that you can come up with, and so that allows them to make the best decision. Ultimately the decision comes down to them or management or whoever it is, but you have to be able to just present all of those options. And it's a lot of work sometimes, a lot of research, a lot of learning, but at the end of the day, that's what we get paid for.
I learned some stuff early on. I worked for a guitar player in the early 80s, and the singer for that band came up to me and said, don't you think he's a little loud today? I said, worst thing I ever did, but it's a good learning experience. I said, between you and me, yeah, he's a little loud. So next thing you know, the singer's going, see, I told you, Adam thinks you're too loud too.
Nice.
And if you're smart, you learn once, but good learning experience early on.
That's funny.
Something's got to be loud.
Of course he's loud, Too loud?
Relative.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was a pregnant pause. All right.
Yeah.
Next topic.
We're all running over these old stories, these old
Oh, that's
situations.
Right.
That's so funny. He's like, I can't tell that one. No,
remember.
I can't talk about that guy. No, that's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. By the way, Adam, did you ever study with Joe?
Oh, no. I loved his playing, and I was goofing around at the time. I was taking lessons, but I never had serious aspirations. I used to always say, and still do, I was going to be a musician, but I didn't want to take the cut and pay, but no, I never had serious, if I can noodle on my couch, that does it for me, and I have a guitar in my hand every day at work,
Mm-hmm. A couple nice ones.
I can live with that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
I got a loud story for you.
I love it. Come on, bring it on.
This is like way back in the start of the G3 stuff. And it was
I know who you're going to. I know exactly who you're going to.
it was Steve Vai and Ingve.
Oh God, yeah.
And
I know where you're going to.
we're doing a sound check the night before the show, and Joe had this habit of me walking around with a dB meter to check everybody's level, right? So I go over to Ingve's spot, and I'm checking his amp, and he goes, "Oh, you think that's loud?" And he bends down and he twists this knob on a pedal and fucking totally blew me off the stage. I'm like, motherfucker. That's the end of that story.
Well, no, I got a story.
I talked to him much after that.
That was the Concord. That was right around the Concord Pavilion gig, and Ingve turned the stage monitor so loud they actually I think they blew the power amp fuse or whatever it was. But basically, the monitors during the jam went out because Ingve was so loud. They were just gone.
Well, yeah, that's because he was only stuck with one cabinet for the jam,
Yeah, that's actually I got a funny story. I'll tell. We played on the side stage for that. I put out a disc on Steve Vai's label, and Joe was kind enough to let us play the side stage at a G3, and one of the other guys in my band, because we had all access passes, decided he was going to go camp out at the edge of the stage, which is not what you're supposed to do in the middle of Joe's set. So he had a close encounter with Mick Brigden, the greatest manager in the world. And so he didn't throw him out of the venue, but he basically said, I'm in Doug's band. So it's kind of like the story what you're talking about. So I think it must have been a text or a call, but I've never seen Mick really pissed.
No.
And I've known Mick for so long that he pulls me into the production trailer and he's about this far and he's yelling at me. And I'm laughing because I know he's not really mad at me, but he's got to yell at me because my guy screwed up and it's my guy and it's cool. I get it. I'm supposed to take the heat. And there's a guy in the production trailer, the guy that sits there with the desk, to make sure everything gets in and gets out fine. And he's laughing hysterically because he's watching me just get my butt whooped. And it was just one of those stories. So I remember that time pretty well. That was a lot of fun. All right. You got great stuff to talk about. Yeah. Oh, Scott Appleton, and I'm going to pull up your photos in a minute. We had this great conversation about phase.
Yeah.
So I have a little experience with the Palmer speaker simulators. I was one of the session guys on Guitar Hero. And so basically everything that I did that was Play With Me, 17, all of that was through a TSL with a Palmer PG01, whatever, PGM, whatever it was. And say that again?
I think it was a PGA 4, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. That would be it. And the one in Alex's rig were the gray ones, which were the early ones. Mine was the blue one.
Yeah. The ones Alex uses are the old PDI-03s. So
can we talk about the little nuance about the version 1, version 2, and kind of how it relates into the longer conversation?
Yeah, because we were actually using 3 of them in the rig. So I had one for this main Marshall or Lurks model that we had. Then I had one for a Mesa Boogie Mark V that we had for a clean sound, and another for what else do we have? We had a core blade in there, a Hughes and Kettner core blade. And the first day we plugged it in, we had he had 2 original old ones, and we had just received a 3rd one, and we wanted to check it out. We plugged it in, and immediately my front of house guy goes, "Yeah, one of those is out of phase." And I'm looking around in the back, there's no phase switch, and I'm going, "What the heck's going on?" So come to find out that the newer models actually were out of phase with the older models. So we had to have a little discussion with the manufacturer and let them know. So,
oops.
Yeah, one of those things.
So, all right. So I'm going to pull up some photos here because holy cow. And one of my favorite things about our conversation, Scott, was you dove into the whole keyboard side. So your ability to manipulate the computer side of a rig, you can probably do it with one finger while you're texting. So I would love to, as we're kind of walking through, I'm just going to show some photos, but can you, because you'd mentioned that you were working, I guess you were in Denver and you were really kind of onboarding doing, I can unpack this part of the convo, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So you were actually doing some tracks for touring acts and whatnot, setting up, things that they could play along with, and you were learning the MIDI stuff. So you kind of got in on that very early on. And so your knowledge of that has really been a huge help working with something like Fractal and working with ground control and working with all these MIDI oriented things. And Alex's rig is pretty nuts here. So if you would, kind of tell us a little bit about how, your love of technology has kind of helped you in your job.
Alex has a rather unique approach to the way he looks and develops his rig. When I first came to him, he was using the old Hughes and Kettner Triaxis, his model. And notice what he had done is he actually had there's a Triaxis controller. Okay, I'll actually go through this rig here. So what I had to do is...
Oops, sorry. There we go.
No worries.
Hold on. So there we go. Yeah. I'll keep it there. I promise.
Yeah. So, but Alex used to take just an amp switcher to change those sounds on those amps. So he had a custom one built where it went to 2 different amplifiers, and that's the way he would change his sounds off those amps. And then he had an Access Electronics FX1 up there that would actually do all the effect switching. So when it came time to build this rig, I had the lurched head, the
Scott, I think we lost your audio there for a second.
stuff. Oh, did you?
Okay,
You
no,
got
you're
me?
back.
No, I still got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I did is the MIDI booster would actually just change between the lurched head, the Mesa Boogie Mark V, and the core blade. And so it would allow him to emulate that old Hughes and Kettner controller, but actually be a MIDI controller instead. And then we actually just did all the effects changes off the Axe effects via the FX1. So, and it would also change into, you'll notice on that picture, there's a computer in there. We were running Apple's main stage program. Alex, during the making of the Clockwork Angels record, had used Guitar Rig 5 to a great extent for some really funky, weird textures. And he wanted to be able to reproduce that on stage. So I actually sat down with the guy from Apple who wrote the program, and he ran me through it and kind of got me up to speed on it. And we used the actual Guitar Rig 5 plugins as part of the rig. So that was kind of like an extra fourth amplifier on the rig.
That's awesome. And we were also talking about the fact you got the RJM stuff in there as well. So it's like,
yeah, a ton of it.
And is that Ingve's rig? No. That's something else.
That was actually that was a prop from the R40 tour. Those they're just false front type things. They're only about 4 inches deep, but they would actually deconstruct that whole section of stacks during the last half of the show.
Okay, tell us about this.
That was a fun one. That's the R40 tour guitars and basses. So we have a big carpet on stage with the logo in the center. And what we did is we laid all the guitars in the big circle like that. And John Aerosmith, our pyro guy and also tour photographer, they brought in the lighting truss from the center, and he actually rode the truss up and took the pictures from above. So he's actually facing down at the floor. So just some great shots, but a lot of classic guitars. On the bottom, you'll see Alex's 355, and then they've got some of his signature models in there of the Access guitars as well. There's a couple of Tellys in there, PRS and stuff like that. So a lot of cool instruments right there.
And we've got even more just in case you needed that.
Yeah, I had 28 guitars out on that tour for Alex, so there was a lot going on.
Not an even 30?
Nope, just 28. So that's all we needed.
This is a nice photo.
That's Alex's 355, the one he's had for years. So that is just a special guitar. I still don't know how Alex plays it because the neck is almost the size of like a Rickenbacker or something like that. And he's just got huge hands. So, but he plays that guitar better than anybody else I know. So
I love the way your face is reflecting in, what do you call that bridge plate cover?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even notice that. That's cool. Yeah.
That would make a great Tinder profile picture.
I've used it. I've used it for that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm trying to swipe right. Hang on.
Yeah.
All right, hang on. Let's get back to you guys. All right, stopping screen share and getting back into this. Here we go. Zoom. Awesome.
Does Alex use heavy strings or?
He was 10 to 52s on everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So not too bad. There was one guitar where I used for the song. Shoot, I can't think what it was. He was actually tuned up a whole step, so I used a set of 9s on that just simply because it was a little fragile with 10s on there. So.
Ouch.
Yeah.
When you think about all the clean stuff, to heavy stuff, you wonder if a little bit heavier string helps with some of that.
It definitely helps because he can be pretty heavy-handed as far as hitting the guitar too. So the 52s really helped out a lot.
Yeah, that's about where we're 52 to 11 on James stuff.
Yeah.
We used Paul had 8s on his Ibanez Fireman for several shows when he came back from a tour break. He's like, oh, my fingers, my calluses went a little bit, so I threw 8s on everything, and it was rubber bands.
Hammett would do that to Justin Cruz sometimes. He would say, "Oh man, I don't know, my hand is really hurting. Can we go down to 10s from 11s?" And he's like, "Oh, this is like 2 hours before the show," and he's back there. on all the floating bridges, just like,
Oh god.
like, thanks, buddy. And then, of course, after that show, it's like, nah, I like the 11s better. Oh, God.
I heard an Aerosmith story.
Yeah, I was just about to
Same
say
thing.
the same thing. Yeah. A buddy of ours was working for Perry, and Perry walked on stage. As he was walking on stage, and announced to his tech that he wanted to change everything from 9s to 8s.
Oh.
So everybody was, all the other guys were back there just furiously changing strings during the show. So
Yeah, thanks.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys gave me so many great notes. Oh, right. So, Scott, the Lurkst amps. I mean, the funny thing is, I saw the photos. I'm like, all right, it's like a Silver Jubilee, but I have, so in my mind, there's some Canadian amp tweaking designer that has made a better Silver Jubilee, and I'm like, and somehow Alex met him at a show. You guys know what it's like. Somebody shows up at a show and they're like, you got to try this. Actually, so a lot of the time those guys are actually really cool, and some of the times they're persistent, passionately so. But the story behind the Lurkst amps, it was really cool. Would you care to retell said story?
Yeah. During the Clockwork Angel record, Alex used a real Silver Jubilee 50 watts of 2553s, and loved it. Thought it was great. How to get, wound up a lot on the record. And when it came time to actually put the rig together for the tour, they had rented it from a rental house in Toronto, and the rental house told them, listen, just take it with you for the summer. We're not going to charge you. No big deal. So Alex brought it to rehearsals, and he was like, man, this is great. Cool. Fine. We got to find a backup. So there was a really well-intentioned person who was working in the office for Rush at the time, and who put the word out that Alex Lyson was looking for a Silver Jubilee. So, of course, all the prices went up instantaneously. And so Scully, Getty's bass tech, was friends with the guys from Mojo Tone down in the Carolinas, and approached them. Our thought process was maybe they've got a kit they can modify to those specs or something like that. Well, one of the guys actually who worked for Mojo Tone had that amp. So he immediately jumped on and said, hey, is there any little tweaks you want to do? And Alex said, maybe if I can just get a hair more gain to it. And in 7 days, the amp, as you see it in that rig, showed up on our doorstep in Toronto. And I was totally in shock. And I mean, and that's the amp that's been his #1 Lurkst amp ever since. So.
I love that story.
Yeah.
All right, that's the happy story. I want the saddest gear fail story that you guys have. And the more people that were involved in the audience, the better.
Do we
Your fault or
have
not.
to?
No, you don't have to, but I mean,
I'm sure with a quick Google search, anybody can find anything like that.
Yeah, YouTube.
Does James falling on stage count, Maddie?
I don't know.
The what? Hold on.
James
it's gonna be like that.
Not your James Zamo, just our James.
No, yeah. There was like a couple days in a row on that tour where he fell off the stage once, tripped over John at one point. That's on video. That's on YouTube. Where I think Petrucci come up behind him to solo, and James turned around, didn't know he was there, and tumbled over. And I had a good gear one with Phil the first time I was with him, filling in for Scott, where they were both walking down to Thrust playing the Switch 625 after bringing on the Heartbreak. It's dual solo. I'm kind of doing my thing, tuning in, listening. All of a sudden, I hear all these wrong notes coming out of Phil. I'm like, wow, did he space out? What's going on? And I see him looking down, and he comes back. He's like, I think one of the springs fell out. And we're looking out there, and sure enough, there's a little tremolo spring out on the Thrust, and we didn't have the back plates on his guitars, and it got hooked on his belt and popped off, and it just went. You all know, as soon as you pop a spring off a Floyd, it went, and it was over. So I ran out there and got the spring. It was horrible, yeah. So that's my funny gear story. And I remember, I think I called Scotty that night. I'm like, dude, does that ever happen with him? You were like, no, man, no. Yeah. After that, we put all the plates back on. So
I think one of my favorite ones is when I was working for Neil Sean, actually. Neil his guitar went out of tune. Like his D string was like wildly out of tune up at the top of the neck. So he came back, he was a bit frenetic about it, and he handed it off, and I put it on the tuner, and it was absolutely on pitch. And I'm like, this is weird. So just kind of, hit the trim, made sure everything was cool, everything was locked down, handed the guitar back off to him, and he came back up and he was playing on it, and it is so out of tune again. I'm like, he's kind of getting a bit upset at this point. He comes running back off. I hand him another guitar real quick, and I put the guitar on my bench, and I'm looking, this string is actually perfectly in pitch at the 12th fret. I'm like, what is going on? Well, the winding had come loose from the string over the saddle piece and had broke the string. So it was just the core going over the actual saddle at the end of the tremolo. So the intonation was just wildly out of tune. So, put a new one on, but it's like going, what the hell's going on here? You can't see it until you get a flashlight on, and you're like, nah, okay, there it is.
No, man.
And back when I first started, I was just like in maybe the second or third year of guitar teching for me. The old Peterson 490 with the vernier control.
Yeah.
My stuff up and all that, and I didn't realize that was off by quite a bit. So I got the whole, man, this is wild. But it was like middle of winter, and we were in Chicago at the Metro or something, and I'm like, wow, that's weird. Everything just like way out of tune. It just must have been whatever, change in weather or something. And even Courtney Love was just like, they're singing. She's like, and it's lower. She's like, what is this sound? Strange. And I didn't realize it until after sound check, and I was quick like, oh shit, I gotta fix all of this stuff. No one was the wiser, so don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I got a weird story. Was back in the Extremist tour. Joe had his rack, a rack and a few heads on the side over by me, and I had my station with the tuner and everything plugged in. And so it's getting towards the end of the show. I look over at the lighting guy, I go, this is getting kind of long, man. I think I just shut his amp off. And a couple minutes later, it's still going. I went to unplug my tuner, and I had a metal power strip. It somehow sent a surge through the rig that started making all fucking kinds of noise. And Joe just turned over and looked at me and said, well, shut the fucking thing off. And yeah. A little embarrassing.
I had a good one like that on the in the somebody else helping you out department. Was I think it was maybe just a couple legs ago recently. Again with the in-ears, you hear everything. Everything was great all day, fine, no problems, just normal show. Show starts up, and into like the second song, I start hearing a pretty good rizz. A really good buzz, and oh man, you can't really sort it out at that time. The next show, well, the same thing, buzz starts, but it starts before the band goes on. So before they kind of show up on stage, I'm running around trying to figure what the hell is going on. This is like, it's got to be something. So I get the next day, I get up with the lighting, and I get with the video guys, and I'm getting with everybody going, we got to find what is going on here. Go through everything, could not find a problem. So showtime comes, and we're all standing there, and the intro music starting, boom, the buzz starts again. And I'm like, hold it, everybody stop. Who just turned something on? And everybody's looking around like, what? We're all just kind of standing here waiting to go. And there's our drum tech, Jimmy Clark, and he's reached up and flipped the switch on the fans for the drum riser. Dumb rheostats so he can adjust the level of fans, and they were just going, wow. Fortunately, Justin Crew, as he reaches around the back and he's like, pulls it out, and it disappears. He's like, is that gone? I'm like, yes. No. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Well, I was just pulling like, I just couldn't figure it out. It was pissing me off so bad. I couldn't figure it out. Sometimes it's the easiest thing, right?
Yeah. Thank God.
Nothing worse than that set change noise.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then with the wireless too, like you get everything. It's all you get what you think is everything's dialed in, and then like the news trucks start showing up, or the external camera crew shows up, and they've got antennas hanging off everything. I was like, well, it's not us. We didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Like, good luck sorting that during the show. It's damn near impossible.
That happened to us in Japan a lot on the Mr. Big run, where I'd have a clean, everything RF was all clean during the day, and as the venue filled up, it turned out to be, I think, cell phones were stepping on this Line 6 wireless that we had.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be clean as a whistle during the day, and as soon as the show would get ready to start, I start to see everything start to creep up, and then it would be just running out there trying to find a clean thing, and those things are.
Is that that?
Sure.
Yeah, that it was like 5 channels of digital wireless, right?
This was the relay, so you had like 10, I think, 10 or 12. But it wasn't like a Shure where you could scan and find a clean spot. You were stuck with what you had, and it was just. We were at the Budokan, and it was doing it at the Budokan. I'm like running back and forth trying to figure out a clean patch between songs. And,
it's not a big music town, don't worry.
Horrible, yeah. Not a classic venue.
Speaking of Cheap Trick, hey, I think I'd like to pose a last question, if that's good, because for some folks it's getting late. Well, not that you guys don't know, late nights and whatnot, but I'd love it if for the folks that are watching, if maybe you've got like one little tip. I noticed on Phil's Jackson's one of the photos that came through. John, I think it was one of the ones that you sent. It's got the titanium saddles on there, and the ball end of the string sits down and actually locks in the saddle, and I've never seen that before.
No, all those are standard Floyd where you still got to clip it off.
But so wait a second, that wasn't stupid me. Great for all eternity. Okay, so in any case, some improvement that's pretty wait, no. I'm sorry. Chad, today's an important day for you.
Is it?
What you got for us there? No, we're going to end. We're going to actually before we just wrap, and if we're done. That's great. But Chad, you're holding out on us, dude. We kind of talked about the other new gear. What do you got?
Oh, gear wise?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about my my little pedal thingy.
I want to I want to say hello to your little friend.
Yeah, I guess through all this downtime, I've sort of took advantage of it and started kind of working with this wireless stuff that I had to get hip to in order to to get proper wireless MIDI going on stage. And
drum roll.
Kind of wasn't happy with what was going on with what was available on the market and stuff. So I ended up making these bi-directional wireless MIDI boxes, and worked great. And then sort of, as a tech, you're always kind of looking around the stage, like how do we make this better? How do we make that easier? And so kind of one of my pet projects was to create a wireless expression pedal. So I've got a cool little there's a control box that you can keep at your rack or at a pedal board or something, and I've just kind of set it up so it'll work with anything. It's 2 channels, so you've got regular expression, and then you've got the switching, so you can actually now with the digital gear you can control any parameters you want. So you could stick that out in the front of the stage. You could activate a delay with the switch and still use expression pedal for a wah or something. So, typically you'd have to run cable all the way around the stage or under the stage. I think I still have lumps on my head from doing that shit. And there's got to be an easier way to do this, right? So, I've done a lot of research, and I've have like us guys, we have a unique perspective. Like sometimes there's a great idea, but you get it in your hand and you're like, yeah, but this isn't going to work on stage. It's plastic, or it's, there's just something's not right about it. So I kind of try to spend a lot of time to make stuff bulletproof, and I've just put that out there today. So, just in time for 0 tours happening, so.
Well, good luck with that.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
Do
man,
you-
sounds cool.
Cool.
Do you have one there?
Yeah, I've got the pedal
Hang on.
here. So it's a basic Dunlop chassis.
Sorry, you pulled it up a minute ago and I was looking. Wait, let me see if I can. Hang on a second. Let me pin your video. Just 1 second. There we go. There we go. Up close and personal.
Am I okay? I just got a regular view.
Oh,
It's just it's a Dunlop chassis, so Kehoe helped me out a bunch, and Frank Aresti actually, and Jimmy.
Jimmy.
So there's there's quite a bit, which is kind of interesting to learn. I'd never written any software before, stuff like that. So it's been kind of a fun journey to go through all that.
Let me get everybody else in on the game.
Just
here.
like stuff that guys like us appreciate is like, on the expression, the TRS
No, I
output,
can't do that.
just a switch to flip the phase. You know what I mean? There's no dip switches, none of that stuff. And then the other cool thing on the switch is most systems are either they operate like the RJM. If you use an external button, that's a momentary system. It just wants to see a quick momentary. And like the Axe Effects, it wants to see latching. So it's either on or off. So I wrote the code so that it would just detect the switch position. And so you can go from a momentary setup to a latching setup rather than having to make, like in the analog world, you'd have to buy another different pedal, or you'd have to figure out, you have to put a different switch in it and stuff. So it's just like,
Very cool.
can I just take it from here to there, plug it in and have it work and not worry about it? I mean, that's kind of angle I come from.
I love
That's
that.
cool.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Let me, there we go. Is there a domain name where people can go to /URL /website where people can just kind of, put in an email or just kind of follow?
Lighttime.com. So LITE-TIME.
Awesome. And do you have any are you going to do a GoFundMe, or are you going to kind of do some kind of funding campaign?
I'm making them here. I just started building them. So, place your order now.
That's awesome. Well, that's, unless anybody has any brilliant, gear tweak that you'd like to share, I want to be respectful of your time. And I just can't thank you enough. I have had, first of all, this call has been great to have everybody here, but I've had the unique privilege of spending some quality phone time and Zoom time with each of you, and it's been a real pleasure. And the guys that you get to work with, not for, are really lucky. So just thanks for being cool, and you're so good at what you do, and it's part of when I put a post out for something like this, one of the things I look for is the number of shares, and this is the 10th episode. But when I saw 27 shares go out, which in John Petrucci world is like, oh, I guess it didn't go on the internet. But in my world, it means that there's a high level of interest to what you guys are doing. So I just really want to thank you for taking your time. In the midst of this, even if we're quote unquote home, you guys have families. So just want to say thank you. Is there anything you guys would like to say as we conclude this Zoom meeting?
Hi, all you guys.
It's been cool.
Thank you, Doug, and thank
Yeah,
you,
thanks,
Maddie,
man.
for
Yeah,
letting me be
thanks,
part
man.
of this. It's great seeing you guys.
Back to work soon.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, everybody come out and see some shows when we're back out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm turning into an alcoholic.
Oh,
It's cool to hang with these guys. I mean, I respect everybody, and it's hard a lot of times for us, unless you're on the same tour, we never see each other because we're always
Exactly.
you're not working with each other. You're stuck in a band and you're in that band, and you never get a chance to talk to a lot of people. So it's pretty cool. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
And I will say one more thing. It's, for us, I think we can all understand, but seeing all these live web streaming shows, I guess it's cool and all, but, certainly for us, the live environment's what it's about. And, nothing's going to replace feeling a kick drum at 95 dB out there, along with everything else. So, hopefully when a door opens, people are going to jump through it. And of course, when it's safe, but nothing's going to replace live music, so
Oh yeah.
hoping.
Soon.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, gentlemen,
Yeah,
thank you
thanks,
so
Doug.
much.
Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Doug.
That was fun.
Want to say
Great
thank
seeing you guys.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
Want to say thanks to everybody that tuned in. Let's see if I can do this in a way that sounds not pitchy. Early days here at the channel. We're having a lot of fun doing these shows. If by chance you haven't followed on Facebook or subscribed on YouTube, let me invite you to do so. In many ways, kind of like one of the reasons I think I can relate to these guys so much is that my whole mission is to help other musicians kind of get closer to that thing that they love. I'm passionate about teaching. I'm passionate about gear. Manufacturers seem to like sending it to me, which means that we get a chance to go on this journey together, which is kind of, in closing, kind of the most important things. Like, music is not something that's intended to be a solo act, and we get a chance to do it together. You know how to find me because you're watching this. Leave some comments, leave some notes, hit me. And I love being in touch with folks, and it's a privilege to get a chance to hang out with people like this. And without people showing up to watch, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be able to do this together. So thank you, everybody. And gentlemen, thanks again for making time. This has been so much fun. And with that said,
Indeed.
Thanks, man.
the show.
We come back next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. And
No, I finished mine.
Yeah.
cheers. Good night.
Safe out there, guys.
Yeah, you too, buddy.
Yeah.
Take care, guys. Good seeing you all, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Talk to you guys
Yeah.
later.
Thanks for setting this up, Maddie.
Hey,
Yeah,
buddy.
thanks, Maddie. Appreciate it, man.
Bye.
Invite.
Bye. Talk to you guys soon.
All right, see you guys later.
See you guys.
Bye.
I'm gonna hit leave.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you. Maddie.
I'm still there.
We're all still here for a minute. All right, ending the YouTube stream.
Okay. See you, Maddie.
See you, Mike. Take care.
Awesome.
All right.